Tonight, when you hear a sound outside your window, something happens in your body before your mind even wakes up. Your chest tightens, your ears sharpen, your breath goes shallow. You didn't decide to do that. Something older than you did. Now go back, way back, 50,000 years. No walls, no locks, no glass between you and the dark. You are sitting around a fire. The flames push back the night just enough. And then, at the edge of the light, you see them. Eyes, low to the ground, blinking, then more eyes, then more. The wolves have found your camp. What happens next is not just a survival story. It is the origin story of almost everything that makes you human. The way you trust people, the way you lead, the way you sleep, the way you love a dog. All of it traces back to moments exactly like this one. Moments when your ancestors sat in the dark and decided what to do when the wolves came. Wolves were not a rare encounter for ancient humans. For most of human evolutionary history, the gray wolf ranged across nearly every landmass your ancestors called home. Europe, Asia, North America, the Middle East. Wolves were everywhere humans were. They were faster than humans. They could smell a human from over a mile away. They hunted in coordinated packs with a level of social intelligence that rivaled anything in the animal kingdom. And they were not afraid of fire. This is the part most people get wrong. The popular image is that fire protected ancient humans from predators. That you lit a torch and the beasts fled. But researchers studying wolf behavior, including the ecologist L. David Meck, who has spent over 6 decades studying wolves in the wild, have documented something very different. Wolves will approach a fire. They will sit at the edge of firelight for hours, watching, waiting, testing. The fire was not a wall. It was a spotlight. And your ancestors were standing inside it. So what did they actually do? The first thing that happened was social, not physical, not a weapon being raised. Something quieter and more powerful than that. The group pulled together. Anthropologists studying ancient encampment sites have found evidence of tight circular sleeping arrangements, with larger adults positioned at the outer edges and children and elderly individuals closer to the center. This was not random. This was deliberate design. Your ancestors understood something that modern military strategists still teach today. The most vulnerable position is the perimeter, and the most valuable resource is the center. But here is where it gets strange. Here is where the real story starts. Not every wolf that came to the edge of that firelight came to attack. Some of them came because they were hungry. Some came because their pack had been scattered. Some came because they were young and inexperienced and drawn to the light the same way you might slow down to look at something you don't understand. And the humans at that fire noticed the difference. Brian Hare, a professor at Duke University who studies the cognitive evolution of dogs and humans, has argued that the domestication of wolves into dogs was not a single planned event. It was not the story of a clever human who decided to tame a beast. It was something far messier and far more interesting. It was a mutual negotiation that happened slowly, over thousands of years, between two highly social species who recognized something familiar in each other. The wolves that came closest to human camps and did not attack were not the boldest wolves. They were the least fearful. The ones whose nervous systems were wired slightly differently. Who could tolerate proximity to a strange species without going into full threat response. And the humans who survived these encounters the most successfully were not always the ones who drove the wolves away. Sometimes they were the ones who left scraps. Who noticed which wolves kept their distance and which ones held their ground. Who started to read the body language of a creature that was watching them every night anyway. This process is called self-domestication. And it did not only change wolves. Brian Hare and his colleague Vanessa Woods have written extensively about the idea that humans themselves may have undergone a version of this same process. That over thousands of generations, the humans who survived were often the ones who were better at reading social signals, forming coalitions, suppressing reactive aggression, and cooperating under pressure. The wolves at the edge of the fire were not just a threat. They were a mirror. Now picture the camp again. The eyes in the dark. The fire burning low. What does a group of humans actually do in that moment? The anthropologist and author David Geary, who has spent decades studying the evolution of human motivation and social behavior, describes something he calls the folk psychology of threat. Ancient humans did not experience a predator the way a lone animal does. They narrated it. They looked at the wolves and they told each other what they saw. They pointed. They warned. They named. They coordinated. Language itself, some researchers have argued, was sharpened and accelerated by exactly these kinds of night threat scenarios because the groups who could communicate the fastest and most precisely under pressure were the groups that survived. One person stands up, not always the biggest person, often the most alert one, the one who has been watching the tree lean all night. They signal to the others. Where are the wolves now? How many? Which direction are they moving? The group organizes around that information. Some people grab long sticks and move to the outer edge, not to attack, but to look larger, to create a visible boundary. Others tend the fire, piling on wood, throwing up sparks. The children are moved without a word being spoken, because everyone in the group already knows the plan, the way any team that has practiced together knows the play before it is called. This is one of the most underappreciated facts about your ancestors. They were not surprised by threats. They rehearsed for them. Researchers studying modern hunter-gatherer societies, including the anthropologist Kim Sterelny, have documented something consistent across cultures that have minimal contact with the industrialized world. Groups regularly discuss past threat encounters in the evening around fires. They reenact them. They debate what went wrong and what went right. They turn survival events into stories and then they tell those stories to children. The story about the night the wolves came is not just entertainment. It is a training manual being encoded into the next generation's nervous system. And sometimes times, the story ended differently than you expect. Sometimes the wolves were not driven away. Sometimes they were fed. Not out of naivety, out of calculation. If a wolf takes food from your hand and does not bite, you have learned something critical about that individual animal. You have established a data point in a relationship. Over time, some of those relationships became something else entirely. The wolf that kept coming back to the edge of the camp and never attacked became a known quantity. The humans who were clever enough to recognize that this particular animal was not like the others were the humans who, over thousands of years, started the process of creating the animal we now call a dog. Your dog, if you have one, is the living descendant of a wolf that chose a campfire over the dark. And you are the descendant of a human who, in some cold night 50,000 years ago, decided not to throw a rock. Archaeologist Greger Larson at the University of Oxford has led some of the most detailed genetic studies of ancient dog domestication. His work suggests the relationship between humans and proto-dogs may have begun as far back as 40,000 years ago, possibly in multiple locations simultaneously. Not one moment of taming, but dozens of separate decisions, made around dozens of separate fires, by humans who were tired and afraid and trying to make it to morning. What kept your ancestors alive on those nights was not strength. It was coordination, communication, the ability to read not just threats but intentions. To look at something dangerous and ask not only is it going to hurt me, but what does it want? That same question is the foundation of every human relationship you have ever had. When you meet someone new and feel uncertain, your nervous system is running the same ancient program. Threat or ally, fear or trust. The wolves at the edge of the fire did not just shape the history of animal domestication. They shaped the way your brain evaluates every stranger you have ever met. The camp survived the night. The fire kept burning. And some of the wolves, eventually, stopped being wolves. Tonight, when you hear that sound outside your window and your chest tightens and your ears sharpen and your breath goes shallow, remember this. You are not overreacting. You are running 50,000 years of field-tested software. And somewhere in the evolutionary memory of the dog sleeping at the foot of your bed, there is still a wolf who chose the light.